the second greatest thief of joy is resentment over a hurt. You cannot be resentful and joyful at the same time. I don't know if you know that or not. Where does resentment come from? Well, when you've been hurt and you've been wounded, then bitterness and resentment can easily take over our hearts. And everybody that's watching this or listening to this right now has been wounded. You've been hurt by words of people. You could still remember some things said to you from your childhood. Some of you have been wounded physically or abused physically. Some of you have been abused sexually. Some of you have been abused emotionally with words. And I want you to know I'm really sorry. This world is a broken planet and life often is not fair. In fact, God never said it would be fair. And that's why our world is so filled with what the Bible calls sin, which is our rebellion against God. And that's what causes us to hurt each other. And we hurt each other all the time, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. You've been hurt by others and you have hurt other people. And so we're all wounded. We all have hurts. And some of you have been wounded and offended deeply. There have been racial offenses and prejudice and bigotry against you. And I'm so sorry. Some of you have been betrayed. And you know what it's like to feel betrayal. Some of you have been rejected and you've gone through all different kinds of mistreatment. Now, I don't know all the ways that you've been hurt, but I'm telling you, regardless of how you've been hurt, you've got to deal with your response. Because resentment over hurt will keep the joy out of your life. And bitterness keeps billions of people all over our world right now from experiencing joy. And we've all seen this, right? With people who get hurt, and maybe even when they were young, and they carry that burden with them their entire life, and they become these mad, angry, bitter people that are just carrying a grudge, and they die bitter, and they're old men and old women who are just cranky, and they hate everything because they never knew how to let it go. You cannot be joyful and resentful at the same time. So what about the Christmas story? Have you ever considered something? How wounded Joseph was when he got the news that his wife-to-be, the woman he loved, they've never had sex, and all of a sudden she comes and says, "Hey, honey, I've got some news, I'm pregnant." I mean, how betrayed would you feel if your fiance said that to you? How wounded would you be by that? I mean, you're planning your wedding and you know you haven't slept together and your wife is now saying, "I'm pregnant." I mean, how would you feel? Well, you'd feel just like Joseph did, and he felt betrayed. He felt cheated. I'm sure he was extremely disappointed, and many of you know that feeling. You know what it's like to be betrayed. All right, here's the second thing. The second truth that has to deal with bitterness and resentment. The antidote is that when Joseph was hurt, he chose to offer grace and let it go. Now, I want you to think about this. Mary is struggling with fear at the first Christmas. Joseph is struggling with anger. I mean, these happen today in marriages, right? Marriage after marriages that I've been through and with and seen and talked to. One spouse is often dealing with fear and the other's dealing with anger, both at the same time. This is pretty common human behavior. And like I said, Joseph had every reason to be hurt and resentful and bitter and to struggle carrying this. But he doesn't attack Mary with his hurt. He offers her grace. And it's a beautiful example. He doesn't dig it in and rub it in, and he doesn't beat her up. He doesn't publicly embarrass her. He's not going to shame her. He just says, "Okay, we're going to call off the wedding." And he's doing the best he can to handle it in a great way. Now let me ask you a question. Who has hurt you deeply? Or what person in your life has hurt you more than anybody else? Many of you know immediately. They come right to your mind. Who's hurt you more than anybody else? A second question. Are you still hanging on to that hurt? Really? Because I can guarantee you that if you're holding on to any of that hurt, that's one of the reasons you're not joyful. You can't be resentful and joyful at the same time. That's why maybe you've lost your joy, because you can't have both. Now you need to understand that resentment is the most worthless emotion on planet Earth. It does nothing except make you miserable. Resentment will never change the past, and it'll never change what happened. And bitterness never makes you feel better. It only makes you feel worse. But somehow in our minds, we think that if we hold on to that hurt and we keep rehearsing it over and over and over, and things keep getting worse and worse and worse, and it hurts us again and again. We think that if we hold on to it, somehow we're going to get even with them. We're going to get revenge. But listen, you're not hurting that person at all. You're only hurting yourself with resentment. While you're here thinking about, oh, they did this and this to me, they're at Top Golf having fun. And they haven't thought about that pain in years. And even before you were born, God knew that you'd be sitting here watching this today. He knew this, and he was hoping that this could get your attention, and that he wants to say to you, let it go. Let it go. You're not going to change anything holding on to this hurt. You say, well, they don't deserve forgiveness. Of course they don't deserve it, but neither do you. And God's forgiven you for all kinds of stuff. And you don't forgive people because they deserve it. Nobody deserves it. You forgive people because you don't want to hold on to that pain anymore. You don't forgive for their sake. You forgive for your sake. You're not hurting them. You're just hurting yourself. And you need to let it go, just like Joseph. Show grace and let the pain go.